Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fake News Friday. I am your trusty guest-level substitute fill-in temporary substitute teachery host, Andrew Lawton, in for Candace Malcolm. But to keep some semblance of consistency here, joining me as always is the producer extraordinaire and host of Ratioed here at True North, Harrison Faulkner. Harrison, another Friday. We made it through a week. How are things going?
Pretty great. That's a pretty nice intro to receive, I gotta say. And at this point, I think you're more than just the substitute host, Andrew. I think people should get ready for a few months of this at least, or at least, yeah, probably 2 months or so of you leading the show.
See, I never tell people that because then they won't tune into the next episode. I always leave a little bit of mystery so that they think that they're going to come back to Candace, and then when they come back next time, and it's like, well, I guess I'm here. I'll stick through this one. But either way, if you're tuning in for me, for Candace, for Harrison, for True North, or because you are trying to anger your apartment neighbor who can overhear what you listen to on your Bose speakers, either way, we welcome you very much to this show. And it's been, as always, a bit of an interesting week, which is always nice because it's very difficult to do a weekly roundup show when there hasn't been stuff happening. One of the big stories this week is the disqualification of Patrick Brown. The disqualification of Conservative leadership candidate Patrick Brown by the committee that is responsible for overseeing the rules of the leadership race. Now, we still haven't had the definitive official explanation, except it was that they say non-compliance, or what they believe was non-compliance with Elections Canada laws. We've had some leaks that have come out, some media reports where people from this committee have said that the main allegation seems to be that a numbered company was paying for campaign expenses, which is just, as far as black and white goes, one of the most black and white illegal things you can do in elections. But nevertheless, we are still talking about something that is going to rub people the wrong way. So Patrick Brown's response to this has been that the establishment has had it out for him, the establishment shilling for Pierre Poilievre. It's been that way since the get-go. A lot of members have been disenfranchised, they say, especially members in ethnic communities, which form a large part of Patrick Brown's support. Have I sufficiently summarized what is a bit of a convoluted story here, Harrison?
Well, I think, and the reality of the situation here, Andrew, is that this is still very, very much a new story. There's a lot to still understand. There's a lot to know about really what's going on here. And I think that we will eventually learn more about these details. But what we have heard is, as you said, clearly black and white. If the allegations and the leaks that we hear are true, then that is obviously a disqualifying act in the race. But of course, Andrew, the knives have come out. In which side, it's still to be seen. But you've got supporters and journalists writing about Patrick Brown, saying that he shouldn't be trusted. You should trust the party establishment. And then on the other side, you have Warren Kinsella, a former Liberal strategist, and someone who is usually in the news, writing opinion pieces, kind of riling up conservatives in the Toronto Sun. He is now basically defending Patrick Brown and calling into question the Conservative Party establishment. And I just think, Andrew, it's sort of a rule of thumb that when a former Liberal strategist starts to call out the Conservative Party establishment for a Conservative Party candidate, that's usually a good sign that maybe the Conservative Party candidate that the Liberal strategist is supporting is probably not the most conservative.
Yeah, Warren Kinsella, there's always been this strange conservative love-in with him. And I think one of the reasons it's so dangerous is because conservatives tend to flock to liberals who criticize Justin Trudeau. We love it. So when you get people that are current or former liberals and they say mean things about Justin Trudeau, we say, oh, even blank is saying this. So conservatives have kind of liked, oh, even Warren Kinsella is saying this. Even Warren Kinsella is saying that, as though we've decided as people on the right to care about and respect and give any credence to what Warren Kinsella says, which I think is exactly the problem. This man is not a conservative. He doesn't speak for conservatives. He doesn't speak for, I think, the issues that matter to conservatives. And I also think when stuff like this comes along, you're reminded of why. And this is a guy who, remember, in 2019, his company was paid by the Conservative Party to say bad things about the People's Party of Canada, about PPC leader Maxime Bernier. So you have to wonder if a lot of this is just Warren Kinsella understanding that his meal ticket is not going to come from Pierre Poilievre. He doesn't want Pierre Poilievre to win because he won't have any of that access that he's had and had in 2019. And that's why he's seeing that Patrick Brown is the next best option. Again, I don't know, but I'm saying that conservatives have to stop caring about what a lot of these pseudo commentators say, because eventually they reveal that they aren't actually speaking to the issues that matter to conservative members.
Yeah, it is one of those problems that we see on the right, Andrew, where, as you said, if there's someone who's somewhat of a prominent figure, and I hesitate to call Warren Kinsella a prominent figure, but in Canadian politics, he certainly has a name for himself. But we see it across the board with the right, like you said, when there are big names that kind of make noise about things that we all care about, then we all immediately say this person is totally on our side, and we have to put a lot of weight behind what they say. But Warren Kinsella wrote an op-ed in The Sun, as we mentioned, and he really kind of, blows his lid on the party and really goes after them. He calls the Conservative Party a three-ring circus that the clowns are fully in control of. And then he goes on to actually cross-reference the Conservative Party of Canada membership list and the Give, Send, Go donor list. So he's trying again to kind of break out that Patrick Brown playbook, the John Charest playbook of demonizing the Freedom Convoy, demonizing those donors to the Freedom Convoy, what was then a legal protest movement to donate to. He cross-references the membership list to basically call into question, and I guess you could say criticize, over 14,000 Conservative Party of Canada members for daring, Andrew, for having the audacity to donate to the Freedom Convoy when they did. So, I mean, it's just one of those bizarre articles where you'd almost not want to be defended by a Warren Kinsella article like this. It is, in my opinion, an indictment of your true conservatism, as we said.
Let me jump in on that, because I don't know if he crunched the numbers himself or if someone gave him the numbers. But either way, you're talking about leaked data from the membership list, which is very tightly guarded, or supposed to be very tightly guarded. Certainly campaigns have had access to it, but why does that make it out to Warren Kinsella? What is he on a campaign? Was this leaked to him as the media? Did he just get these numbers that someone else crunched, or did he actually have the membership list and do this himself? I don't know one way or another. But I'm looking at this, and he says most of the donations made in secret. Or I don't know what the made in secret means. Does it mean that you didn't rent a blimp and advertise that you donated to the Freedom Convoy? It's trying to infer that there is something dirty or icky about what's happened. But I go back first and foremost to the credibility question, because here's what he said. Brown wasn't merely one of the frontrunners in the race. He was legitimately the candidate an increasing number of insiders considered the likely winner of the race. He had signed up tens of thousands of supporters. So I think there was a path to victory for Patrick Brown. I think there was a way that he could have won, but I've never heard an insider say he was the likely winner. It's that he could win. If this thing happened, he could. So I think that also speaks to how out of touch he is with the party.
Well, it is. And of course, there's always an opportunity for the second place or perhaps the second favorite to win. It's sort of like in the leadership race, if you're the second favorite, you're kind of quietly the favorite because of how the ranked ballot system works and how it all kind of gets tracked across the country. So, of course, at the beginning, there was an opportunity for Patrick Brown to win. People have recognized that he has a particular set of skills when it comes to organization and when it comes to signing up memberships. Everybody knew that was his candidacy was certainly not to be taken lightly.
I thought you were going Liam Neeson there for a second. He's got a particular set of skills.
Yeah, exactly. It was the sort of thing where he did have a shot at winning, but like you said, it wasn't there's a clear favorite in the race, and there's sort of a clear second place. And that was obvious from the beginning. So to make this grand statement as though Patrick Brown was up there with Pierre Poilievre and was a potentially an easy winner is ridiculous. But I mean, we saw some hilarious takes on the Patrick Brown campaign throughout this short but exciting window. And I will say this about Patrick Brown: he does have a way, Andrew, at part of one of his skills is not making politics so boring. He does have a way of kind of throwing some spice into politics these days. Every time he's involved, there's usually something that happens. And but we've got some hilarious takes throughout his short leadership campaign. And I thought the best one probably of them all, Andrew, was Charles Adler, the former radio host. I don't know if he still has a radio show. He might, but I'm not sure. He wrote on Twitter, when was this? This was in March, I believe. Yes, it was in March when Michelle Rumpel-Garner became national chair or co-chair of Patrick Brown's campaign, and she obviously left that post a few weeks ago. But when she announced that she was joining the campaign, Charles Adler wrote on Twitter, "Welcome to the worst day of Pierre Poilievre's career." And I have to say,
No. You've misquoted him. It's welcome to the worst day of hashtag Pierre Poilievre's career. Yeah, not even an @ sign. He's been devoted to a hashtag.
Hashtag Pierre Poilievre's career. I mean, that's going to live on for quite a while, I think, Andrew.
Yeah, and it's funny. And here's a guy, and I, for years and years, listened to Charles Adler as someone starting out in talk radio. I've appeared on his show, and it's been very difficult to see his descent into just complete insanity on Twitter taking place in real time. And again, here's one where he positions himself as being this grand oracle that is the true insider, that knows everything, that knows the party, that knows conservatism. And he thought that, I mean, again, there's a lot that's wrong with this, apart from the hashtag. So he thought that Pierre Poilievre was going to be quaking in his boots, that Michelle Rumpel-Garner joined Patrick Brown's campaign, and somehow all of those three people, the only one remaining involved in the leadership race is Pierre Poilievre. So Michelle Rumpel-Garner's gone, Patrick Brown is gone, Pierre Poilievre's still there. So his career seemed to have withstood Charles Adler's tweet, which means I think we need to reevaluate this self-description by Uncle Chuck. Yeah, there it is. Legend. Yeah, I think we got to demote him. Maybe hashtag Charles Adler is all he gets now.
Yeah, hashtag young legend or working his way up might be better, but he certainly lost the status of being a true legend, a self-proclaimed legend, that is.
Yeah, it's this is perhaps weird because I'm digging back into the archives on this one. This is 2019. But if we want to say, because there are a lot of people that used to listen to Charles Adler that would think he's the prime example of being a conservative. So I feel I would be remiss to not show that the thought of the Conservative Party literally brings him to tears now.
I want to get a little personal here with Charles Adler, everyone. Now, Charles, you have, deep conservative roots. And you've kind of adopted some of the when we come to talk about social issues and things like that, maybe more of a different leaning. What was your come to center moment? Was it this campaign?
No, it was the last one. It was the barbarian hotline. It was the flirting with Islamophobia. I don't even like to discuss it because it sickens me. Party that I supported for a number of years turned on my neighbors, on my brothers, on my sisters, my fellow Canadians. And it's been difficult. And I am a fiscal conservative, small business conservative, pro-pipeline conservative, but I can't go to that other side of the moon. It's the dark side of the moon. I can't go there.
Talk to me about this campaign, though. What did you see here that bothered you?
Well, what I saw in this particular campaign was a leader who was highly scripted, who couldn't tell people how he genuinely felt about some of these social issues, couldn't genuinely say that, yes, I'm a faithful Catholic, and these are my Catholic beliefs. I'm proud of my church. I'm proud of my beliefs. But I'm proud to be Canadian, and I'm proud to abide by the rule of law, and I'd be darn proud to be your Prime Minister, and my number one task would be to enforce the laws of Canada, not to enforce the dogmas of the Catholic Church. That could not possibly be difficult for Andrew Scheer to say. He's a very smart person. If he can't say that, he's missing an element of leadership character. And on the one hand, it's Justin Trudeau has no moral authority. Justin Trudeau has no moral authority. Take charge, then have some moral authority yourself over the most important issues to many people who aren't voting Conservative.
All right. It's clearly an emotional subject for him. I don't want to exploit the man's grief, but let's not hold him up as the oracle of conservatism. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, if Charles Adler was crying about the 2019 federal election result, I shudder at the thought about what he's doing, looking back on his now failed prediction about the Michelle Rumpel-Garner joining Patrick Brown's campaign as the worst day of his career. He must be quite emotional about that these days as well.
Yeah, certainly that is the case. Let's take a turn to this is, I think, an interesting story, and there's a story beneath the story here. So you may have seen this week, CBC reported on this story about new military dress standards, that hair coloring, face tattoos will be permitted under new military dress rules. Now, I would say there's nothing more professional than a member of the armed forces with a giant face tattoo. Like, just think of Mike Tyson at CFB Borden doing push-ups. Like, that is the quintessential Canadian experience right there. But what I find interesting is that CBC readers learned about this on July 5th, 2022. Harrison, spike the football here. When did True North readers learn about this?
April 14th. So CBC is only just a little late, Andrew. They're only just a few months late to this story about the military. True North broke the story months ago, and to everyone's surprise, Andrew, the CBC failed to mention True North, failed to credit True North for breaking the story months earlier. It might be because they're just embarrassed about their lack of serious journalism. They must be embarrassed about the fact that they just can't seem to stay on top of the news.
Yeah, and this is not exclusively a problem that affects True North. The CBC is kind of notorious for this, and they have so much funding, they have so many staff, they have so many resources, they have a level of funding that most commercial newsrooms in this country would kill for, yet they still rely so heavily on the work done by other newsrooms, done by reporters for Post Media, for the Toronto Star, and increasingly for a lot of independent and local outlets too.
Well, what good is a public broadcaster, a broadcaster that the only job of that broadcaster is to give Canadians the news? What good is it if a small group like we are at True North are beating CBC months early to a story that is news at the time, and only that the CBC only reports as news once the government itself pushes out the press release? I mean, it's journalism by press release for the CBC. It's been that way for years now, and they're really not doing anything to give Canadians value. All you really have to do at this point is abandon the CBC and just basically look at watch True North, watch other alternative media sites, because not only is the CBC not getting their news from us, because if they were, they'd be quicker. It wouldn't take them months to write our story. They're waiting on the government to release the news. So if the CBC isn't going to release the news, if they're not going to do it before the government press release writes it for them, then what good is there? And we've seen the CBC do this constantly. True North wrote a story in February about the NDP, an NDP candidate using homophobic slurs and promoting Antifa, and the CBC took our story, posted it a few days later. Then True North wrote a story also about an NDP MP and a Liberal MP's questioning their Indigenous claims. So an NDP MP calls out a Liberal MP for not being Indigenous enough, sort of a Canadian Elizabeth Warren story there. We wrote that on April, and then CBC takes it 3 or 4 days later and writes the same story, of course, failing to credit us. So we've seen it happen before. We see it happen many times. Again, it's not going to change at this point. How long do we expect, or how much rope we want to give the CBC to fix their act, to get their act together? It's not going to happen. So at what point, Andrew, do we just give up and say, look, these journalists just don't know how to do their job properly? All they have to do is just read True North.
Yeah, my interview earlier this week with Pierre Poilievre touched a little bit on CBC funding, which the elimination of has become a pretty key part of his campaign. And he had said that CBC shouldn't be occupying a space where the private sector can provide the service. And in this case, the private sector literally already has provided the service by the time the CBC runs the story. It's already been covered. It's already out there. So I think we need to get some momentum going here, where every time they steal a story, we get a refund of a certain amount of the fee that we pay to CBC, and however long it takes that they're late to a story, we also get a refund on that. So we won't get all of the $1.4 billion that way, but I think we might get a little bit of it. And I think that, a lot of the time media chases trends, and there's been no greater example of this week that I've seen than the Canadian volunteer soldier that has been broadcasting his or her exploits in Ukraine. I think it's his, but who knows anymore with the uniform code. And this Canadian-Ukrainian volunteer has been, it's actually amazing, 120,000 followers, what the Telegraph calls florid and urgent, cutting through with a boy's own adventure style, had infiltrated the Russian-occupied Kherson, had gone on a bicycle disguised as a Russian soldier, but not exactly What happened here?
Well, it basically just took a bunch of. This is what happens on the internet. You just can't get away with this stuff anymore, Andrew. It's impossible. People will eventually find out, and I wonder what this person thought as he started to cross the 50,000 follower threshold, the 100,000. He must have known that the gig was going to come to an end at some point, and sure enough, it did. A bunch of just internet sleuths and people who are experts in body armor and firearms, in all these different things that he was posting of, obviously caught wind of this guy's story, and smelling that something might not be exactly right, of course they began investigating. And one social media user identified that the rifle he was using was fake. It was an airsoft rifle. I wonder how long this guy really thought he was going to get away with this by using and posting photos of airsoft rifles, as if people who know this stuff aren't watching all the videos and content that gets put up. I mean, it really kind of baffles the mind that people think that today they can get away with it. But of course, he was caught out, and so this person here who found out that the rifle was fake, he wrote on Twitter, "We knew this day would come. Canadian Ukraine 1's big reveal, his battle rifle. Yes, it's all airsoft gear. Let's take a look at his loadout piece by piece." So they go through everything that he's holding. Turns out every single thing he's holding, Andrew, is fake. What a surprise. Then another person who is a director of training at an open source investigation group said that the photos of his dented body armor had also been stolen. So he just basically did a reverse image search of dented body armor, Andrew, and put it up as his own. And he managed to trick over 100,000 people on social media. It's just incredible. And it makes you really wonder how much of what we see is either doctored or designed to get people to ride, or just designed for people to ride the wave of the Ukraine war, to kind of make themselves the heroes. It's actually quite disturbing in a way, and I'm sure that a ton of people are doing this. But there's more of this. There's more sort of this story unraveling for this guy. Another person wrote, "In this new photo, we get a good look at the chin strap and fastener. It's a plastic side release buckle. An automatic MK7 does not utilize a plastic buckle. Rather, it has a loop and button. Only the airsoft replica utilizes a plastic buckle." And then someone decided to track his location. This is the best part. He doesn't even actually try to get close to Ukraine. It turns out that he's in Toronto or in Ontario the whole time, Andrew. This person decided to track this Ukrainian Canadian volunteer's location. He wrote on Twitter, "I first sourced a web article talking about Canadian volunteers in Canada. I used that to create a Grabify link, which I then masked through a link shortener and sent to him claiming the article mentioned him, and I congratulated him." It turns out that if you open up the link, then it tracks where you opened it up from. Turns out, of course, this Canadian-Ukrainian volunteer wasn't too smart about this. Open up the link. Sure enough, he was in Ontario, Andrew. So what a surprise there.
Maybe he was on a break week. You never know. It gets very difficult. He left Kherson to come back to visit with the family for the long weekend in Toronto or something. You never know. It's circumstantial, as my learned friends say.
He was given leave to see his wife and his kids, of course, and then just to return back into battle. I mean, it's just another story that turns out to be fake about what's going on in Ukraine. Not to say that everything is fake, but certainly what we have seen is an information battle where we are getting inundated with misinformation and truth, and it's up to us to try and figure out what is real and what isn't. And that, of course, leads to all of these problems, and we're just seeing another one here.
Yeah, no, I think you're off. I think you're way off on this. The guy's a legend. He's clearly the Charles Adler of volunteer soldiers in Ukraine, and no one can say otherwise. It's very interesting because just looking at the bigger picture here, when we went back to the very beginning of this is the first time in a lot of people's lifetimes that there's been a European ground war that has taken place. What's gone on with Russia and Ukraine, and it's the first time we've had a war of this scale in the era of information, with the internet, with Twitter. I mean, wartime propaganda is not new, but it certainly is very different. And I was trying to do something with this on my show back at the beginning of all this. And the one thing that we saw is that there was a right side and a wrong side of the conflict that emerged very on. And we saw this in Western media, politicians. It was Ukraine good, Russia bad. And I think generally speaking, if nothing's black and white, but I think that obviously Russia was the aggressor here. But the one thing I'll say is that when you filter it through that lens, there was a lot less skepticism that was devoted to a lot of these stories early on. Like there was the stupid one that came out, the Ghost of Kiev. There was another one, this mythology of what happened on Snake Island, which ended up not being true, and other things as well. And truth is truth. Truth doesn't have an agenda. As Ben Shapiro says, facts don't care about your feelings. Like the fact that this guy did as much as he did and got as large of an audience as he did is because he was feeding into something that people wanted. They wanted a hero story. They wanted someone that was going over, putting their life on the line. But there are real people doing that. He just isn't one of them.
Yeah, and we tracked this on previous episodes of Fake News Friday. I recall when all of this kicked off months ago, I think we did a whole episode on some of the footage we were seeing out of Ukraine, because of course when you see it at first, it's crazy. You're seeing fighter jets flying over towns, and it looks totally real, but it's video game footage. I mean, how many pieces of footage did we see, Andrew, that ended up being video game footage of a video game called Arma, where the graphics are amazing and it looks really real. It looks like an aircraft is being shot down over the skies, and that was kind of used to create the Ghost of Kiev. They even got a U.S. congressman duped by the Ghost of Kiev story, which is quite hilarious, and that'll definitely go down in the story of this conflict as a sort of a lighter-hearted moment. But again, one of the darker sides of this was that we were seeing on both sides a concerted effort to try and mislead people by using completely fake footage or even using old footage. I mean, there was footage of a young girl yelling in the face of what was supposed to be a Russian soldier, an invading Russian soldier, and that turned out to be a clip from Israel years ago. But nonetheless, it didn't get called out until it had been seen by millions of people. And there were these emotional videos of Ukrainian soldiers saying goodbye to their family and friends. And that ended up being movie footage. I mean, we've seen so much of this. And I think that over time, this is going to be used by more and more governments in times of conflict. I mean, it's quite a useful tool. You can basically convince the Western world, the world on social media, of something that may or may not actually be happening. Clearly, what we saw, like you said, was an effort to make things look black and white, was an effort to make things or convince people that things were a certain way. And I think that's just a factor and a reality. We all have to come to realize that, this is what's going to happen now going forward in all of these conflicts, that it's up to us to kind of sharpen our skills at deciphering what's real and what's fake and be a bit more skeptical about what we see, because, I mean, this is just another example of someone who tried to get away with it and eventually got caught.
Yeah, and also Harrison's a deep fake.
Well, yes, exactly. You never know. Even with True North, you got to be skeptical about what you see, I guess, these days.
I'm not one to judge. I went to a deep fake ABBA concert, but that's a topic for another day.
Was that a holographic concert?
Yeah, no, it wasn't even a hologram. It was worse than that. It was a video deep fake. But again, I'm not fake newsing myself on this Fake News Friday. Harrison Faulkner and yours truly, Andrew Lawton, standing in for Candace Malcolm here. Hope you all have a fabulous, fantastic, wonderful weekend. We will talk to you next Friday with the best and brightest of the fake news from around the globe and the country. I guess the globe includes the country, so take from that what you will. But we'll have a good one, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.